Story of the morning, so let's get right to the breaking news.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good morning and welcome to your new day. It is Thursday, April 25th, 8 o'clock in the East, and we do begin with breaking news. Former Vice President Joe Biden is running for president, or as he would say, literally running for president. He made the announcement just a short time ago and immediately becomes the frontrunner in the 2020 Democratic field, which is now the largest in modern U.S. history.
The video he released this morning goes directly after President Trump. It zeroes in on the president's response to the deadly white supremacist rally in Charlottesville 2 years ago.
Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging, and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime.
Well, the former vice president is already building up a major base of support. He's gathering endorsements from a slew of lawmakers this morning. We'll speak with one of them straight ahead. But first, let's get to CNN's Arlette Saenz. She is live in Biden's hometown of Wilmington, Delaware, with the breaking details. Arlette.
Hey, Allison, Joe Biden has officially been a presidential candidate for 2 hours now, and he's already gearing up a busy schedule to take that message directly to voters. Later today, he'll be at a fundraiser in Philadelphia, and tomorrow appearing on The View. Then Monday, he is hitting the campaign trail with his first stop in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a union-focused event. And then he'll be hitting all of those early voting states over the next few weeks. And the culmination of this rollout, this launch for Joe Biden, is going to be May 18th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, his campaign pointing out that it's the birthplace of democracy. Joe Biden making it official today, hoping his third run for the White House is the charm. It's the latest chapter in the 76-year-old Democrat's long political career. His life started in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where Biden traces back his blue-collar roots.
Everything important in my life that I learned here in Scranton.
His family later moved to Delaware, where Biden first took public office as a county councilor, then a long-shot bid for Delaware's Senate seat, winning at the age of 29. But shortly after that victory, tragedy struck.
I got a phone call. You got to come home. Your wife and daughter just been killed. A tractor trailer broadsided them and killed them. Your sons may not make it.
A grief-stricken Biden considered not joining the Senate, but was sworn in at his son's hospital bedside. The Delaware Democrat commuted to and from Washington each day, often by train. He later married a teacher, Jill Jacobs, and had another daughter.
No man deserves one great love, let alone two.
Biden went on to serve 36 years in the Senate. Ted Kaufman was Biden's chief of staff for nearly 2 decades, witnessing the highs and lows of his career up close.
He's got character. A lot of character comes with age, but a lot of character comes from being through, incredibly difficult times. So he's very comfortable in his skin.
In 1987, Biden launched his first run for president.
As today, I announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America.
But his campaign tanked after charges of plagiarism. 20 years later, Biden made a second run for the White House, but after a poor showing in Iowa, dropped out again, later landing in a different spot on the 2008 Democratic ticket.
The next Vice President of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
The oftentimes blunt Biden at President Obama's side as vice president for 8 years. The two forged a close friendship, cemented even deeper when tragedy hit a second time.
My father, my hero, the next Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
In 2015, Biden's eldest son, Beau, died after a battle with brain cancer.
Beau was my soul. Beau was my conscience.
The grief ultimately impacted his decision on the 2016 race.
Unfortunately, I believe we're out of time, the time necessary to mount a winning campaign for the nomination.
Now, after months of deliberations, Biden is giving a third run for the White House a go. His more than 4 decades-long career is set to face a fresh look, from legislative successes like the Violence Against Women Act.
I wrote that act myself with my own hand.
To his experience on the foreign stage. But other areas of his career will undergo renewed scrutiny, like his role in crafting the 1994 crime bill and his handling of the 1991 testimony of Anita Hill.
Professor, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
As he prepares to take his frontrunner spot in the Democratic primary field, those closest to Biden say he's ready for the challenge ahead.
When Joe Biden looks in that mirror, he's not going to stop, not do this because it's going to be hard, or he might lose, or anything else. He does it because he won't feel right about himself.
Now, Joe Biden has already earned some high-profile endorsements. His home state Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, he's endorsed him this morning, as well as Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey. Just a few of the high-profile endorsements that they are going to be rolling out in these coming days as they're trying to show these signs of strength for Joe Biden as he's currently the front-runner. One big question is, will he be able to maintain that front-runner status through these primaries and get to that general election matchup against President Trump? John and Allison.
All right, Arlette signs for us in Wilmington, Delaware. Arlette, thanks very much. Joining us now to talk about this big moment in the race, David Gregory, CNN political analyst, Jeff Zeleny, CNN senior Washington correspondent, Nia Malika Henderson, CNN senior political reporter, and Jonathan Martin, national political correspondent for the New York Times, also a CNN political analyst. And David Gregory, in the news this morning, not just that Joe Biden got into the race. We knew that was coming, but the way that he got in the message with which he chose to enter the race. We will not forget Charlottesville. He says the soul of the nation is at stake.
Right, and I think that was using this iconic moment of Charlottesville as a cudgel against President Trump, saying to primary voters that this is who Trump is, that we have to take the fight to him, and that Trump is counter to what America is. So it wasn't about personal biography. People know who Joe Biden is and what he's been in politics. And it was also a message designed to reach out to the progressive wing of the party, to minority voters, to young, socially conscious voters, to say, this is what matters. Questions about race baiting, about immigration. That's where we have to define this race. And that even though Biden, doesn't represent the future, right? You always think about going forward in politics, not backward. He's essentially saying, I am uniquely qualified to get off the bench and stop the madness of Donald Trump as president. And as David Axelrod said in the last hour, if there's a stature gap here, he wants to exploit that, to immediately become the front runner, to suggest, look, I can do this, it's me, Joe Biden, and then there's everybody else in the Democratic field.
Yeah, so Jonathan Martin, there was reporting that behind the scenes, his team was trying to debate what their first video would look like, what the message would be. And it seems as though they decided to go for the jugular with going right to the Charlottesville images.
Yeah, we had a story on Tuesday night reporting that one of his new ad people, who's known for his creative spots, for example, he did the MJ Hager spot, which you guys have seen, of course, on the air, Mark Putnam, created kind of a Scranton Joe video showing Biden at his old house in Scranton. That was more biographical in nature. That didn't go over that well with the Biden team and Biden himself. They wanted something that was more in this moment. And Biden is passionate about the events in Charlottesville, and he's been consumed with this for the last couple of years, plugging John Meacham's book at every turn around the country the last year. And that's why they ran this spot that was created by Mike Donilon, his longtime advisor, that gets at what Biden is really passionate about, but that also doubles as something else, guys, and that is going over the Democratic primary nitty-gritty and focusing his party's voters on what they are most consumed with, which is Trump and beating Trump. And it also has the added effect of saying this is not a normal election, because if it was a normal election, he wouldn't be an obvious candidate. His whole case is this is a national emergency campaign, and that's why you need me in this moment.
We need to win. I'm the guy who can win. It's a pretty simple message. Jeff Zeleny, you've got some fresh reporting from an interesting aspect of this. Now, it was not in that video. Joe Biden didn't wrap himself in the Obama presidency, but it is an area where there are people think he can make inroads, saying it was the Obama-Biden administration. What is Team Obama saying this morning?
Well, there's no question that that Joe Biden is in this moment because he was Barack Obama's running mate for 8 years, his partner for 8 years. And he was indeed a very active vice president, in the room for every major decision, in charge of key pieces of the portfolio. One thing that we're not going to see today, of course, is an endorsement from the former president. For one, it probably wouldn't work anyway. We saw in 2016 Barack Obama barnstorm the country for Hillary Clinton. That didn't work. So endorsements have limited value, and in this case, perhaps even more so. Barack Obama, I'm told, has had several conversations with Joe Biden. They know that he has to win this. Joe Biden has to win this on his own. But he did sort of issue a statement through a spokesperson this morning praising Joe Biden and saying it was the best decision he ever made as a running mate. Now, as we go forward here, there's no question. I was talking to an advisor to Joe Biden who said what he's trying to do, as Jonathan was saying, is shake the conscience here and refocus the debate that there is one thing that this 2020 election is about. It's not about Medicare for all, not about the Green New Deal, not about inmates voting. It is about defeating Donald J. Trump. So that is what Joe Biden is trying to do today. Of course, he can't hit the fast forward button through this primary, but he's trying to reframe and refocus Democratic voters on the big picture here. And change comes in many ways. Change could be a younger candidate, a female president, or it could be change from what the current situation and station is. And that is what the Biden folks hope he can deliver for change. But for all the talk today about how he's going after Trump, he still has to go on the campaign trail. And Joe Biden's biggest challenge often has been Joe Biden.
Ania, it's such an interesting time, right? So if Joe Biden is going to be the change agent he's 76 years old, people have known him for decades, and in the most diverse field we've ever seen. But, who knows what voters want? I mean, because in the polls, they often say that their top thing is who can win.
That's right. I think that is what they want. In the polls we've seen so far, and again, it's early, Biden has had a pretty steady lead there, in the upper 20s, 28, 30% or so. And you've got Bernie Sanders in there as well. And that, of course, comes from some name ID. But it also, again, I think comes from what a lot of people think, which is that Joe Biden has the stature. He has the record. He obviously has the Obama connection as well to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. And you see in that video, that's essentially what he's saying, that he has the character to go and make the case against Donald Trump, who he's saying doesn't have the right character, doesn't embody the American spirit in the way that Joe Biden is arguing that he does. Jeff says there that his campaign feels like he needs to sort of refocus and reframe the debate. I don't think that's going to be too hard, because that's where a lot of voters are. They're very pragmatic, particularly if you think about older voters, which I think is a real strength of Joe Biden. There is no real need to refocus. There's a sense of urgency and even desperation among Democrats to figure out who is the person to be able to beat Donald Trump. And in many ways, the idea is that there's somebody who can not only talk to white working class voters in the Midwest, but also rally other parts of the base, particularly African American voters in the South, to get through the primary.
And if electability, go ahead, David.
I think we should focus, too, on the nitty-gritty here, right, which is this focus on Pennsylvania. You're going to be talking to Bob Casey, Senator Casey, who's endorsing him. That's Western Pennsylvania. Well, where's his first fundraiser going to be? It's going to be in Philly with David Cohen, who is the general counsel of Comcast, which owns NBC, who is a big-time fundraiser for the Democrats. So it's a bit of shock and awe to say to other fundraisers in the party, this is where your priority needs to be. I also talked to a Democratic strategist yesterday who said, look, Biden is like Trump in a crowded field as he was in 2016, which is it's not a one-on-one race. It's who can be over 30%, and Biden likely to be over 30% all the time, and ultimately that's the key to victory. But the urgency of stopping Trump is also an answer to progressives in the party who are not in sync with Joe Biden, and he's not in sync with them. The argument is going to be Medicare for all, free college tuition, other progressive priorities are going to have to take a back seat to getting Trump out of office.
Yeah, winning is in common, though, among all those people,
right.
And that's how he can reach them. That's why Pennsylvania matters for sure. And if you look at the slate of endorsements he's already racked up, that's where they come from largely. But there are other states, too, that are interesting, Jonathan Martin, and you've been traveling around the country and done a lot of focus on South Carolina, which is a state which a lot of people are leaning into, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, among others, because of the large African-American vote, is also a good state for Joe Biden.
Yeah, and we actually got a hold of his schedule for next week, John, and I can tell you that after he goes to Iowa, which of course is the first state, he's going not to New Hampshire, John, he's going to South Carolina, which shows his value and the value he places on South Carolina. It is the fourth state on the calendar, but for Biden, it may be the most important state. It's where he has the deepest connections of all the early states, and to your point, it's the first state with a real presence of African Americans. And if Biden proves there that he has real appeal with that community, that is going to be an enormous advantage for him going into Super Tuesday, and could be a real challenge for other candidates in the race. If he does not fare well in South Carolina, and other candidates like Kamala Harris or Cory Booker steal his thunder with the black community, probably curtains for Joe Biden.
So, Jeff Salame, what do you think this does to the dynamic of the rest of the race? Do all of the other candidates now have to respond to Biden, or do they just stay on the track that they were on, talking about their pet issues?
I think for the moment, they will give him his moment, and they have no choice, frankly. I mean, one thing that Joe Biden has done here is sucked all the oxygen out of this very large race. So for the moment, the race will be focused on him. I've talked to a couple strategists for other campaigns this morning, and they said, you know, they respect Joe Biden, but they are going to allow this to play out a little bit. Again, Joe Biden, you know, what we've seen so far has been a pre-recorded ad. He's not answered a question from a voter, from a reporter. He's not encountered a protester. He, of course, knows how to do all of that. He's been at this longer than most of the field combined. But the question is, he's going to get tough questions from voters. So that, you know, when it comes to the unscripted moment of this, they are going to allow it to play out. But I do not think you are going to see, at least in the very beginning, from most Democratic candidates, much heat or questions or skepticism or criticism of the Obama-Biden legacy. I do think that will come. That will come particularly from Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, pointing out specific parts of the Obama record that may not have been as strong. But don't forget, Barack Obama is incredibly supportive. So if you take him on, his record on, and Joe Biden vis-a-vis that, you were taking Obama on. So it's tricky terrain here. For now, I think people are going to give him a bit of space and see what he does with it. But this shakes up the race in no, it hasn't been shaken up like this before. It changes everything. We'll see what Joe Biden does with it.
Nia, very quick last word.
Yeah, in any ways, the field is set now. This was the sort of final piece with Joe Biden. His record will certainly get some scrutiny. You saw Elizabeth Warren kind of deliver some shade his way in our town hall when she talked about that bankruptcy bill, something that he backed. So I think that, the crime bill, and as well as Anita Hill. So all of those are things I think are going to be in the ether, particularly among activists. But again, I think Joe Biden's bread and butter is those moderate voters who in some ways feel like a lot of the conversation around the Green New Deal, whether it's Black Lives Matter, you know, sort of activism, that is something that can sort of be put on the back burner with the notion that the most important thing is to defeat Donald Trump. And they, in some ways, see that Joe Biden might be the best to do it.
All right, guys, thank you all very much for all of the analysis on this breaking news morning. Okay, so Joe Biden is already lining up endorsements in just the first 2 hours of his campaign. So we will speak to Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, who was among the first to endorse. He's next.